Yeah, hello everyone. Um, I just wanted to talk about my obsession with winning the lottery, and how it's all connected to this expansive delusion that formulated in psychosis, and it's still present where its ugly head, and it involves my iPod, and the songs on it, and the number that they're on, especially when I hit shuffle. If I feel as though if I made a connection, I'll go back and hit shuffle again, to see where certain numbers lay within that timeline. And, at times, some, um, coincidental occurrences have taken place. For me, 83 equates to winner. Um, when I first thought of that I added it up to equal 85. I made a mistake, but playing 2 for 1, you could add 2 onto that, and 85 would be winner. So I check 83 and 85. And I have a song on there by Dr. Hook, The Millionaire. I've got more money than a horse has hairs. A rich old uncle died and answered all my prayers. And that's the song. There's also a song by Sailor called A Glass of Champagne, and that's a really upbeat, celebratory song. Also got Thank You by Alanis Morissette. And I've slowly come to realise, that a lot of that is very grandiose, and that there's a certain degree of affect attached to notions like that, where all my hope and optimism dwells. But I come across a couple of words the other day, um, and it's been beneficial in regards to my delusional thinking, and that's corporeal and incorporeal. Corporeal means it has a body. Incorporeal means that it doesn't have any matter at all. And generally, when I slip into delusional thinking, I detach from my physical being and enter into this solipsistic world, where everything is grand and opulent. So um, that's part of my process that is slowly becoming concrete. The lottery I played, or still do play, it was banned in Australia in the sense that you couldn't bet on overseas lotteries anymore. So I don't know what they came up with, but they developed a means where you could still bet on some kind of system, and the prize pools, were incredibly large. I got paranoid the other day and went to their site and opened up a chat line and questioned the validity of what they were doing. And the next day, my bank, I fear, had some service difficulties. Their app wasn't working, some ATMs were affected, bank branches closed, because I expressed my paranoia, to these people in the in the chat room about the legitimacy of what they were doing. And, it all flared from there. I ended up accidentally closing the chat line, before I'd finished my conversation. But sometimes I fear that being in Southeast Asia, they have their own virus, so to speak, and unsuspecting everyday people, who are prone to grandiose thinking. I suspect they're taken advantage of, by this, grand virus that substitutes or fishes, gambling sites and things along those lines, where you're not actually receiving a product. And, that's what my paranoid conspiracy was about. And it's, I've betted on that lottery since then, because one of those magical numbers come up, 100 million, in psychosis. I contacted the CIA or tried to contact them, and at the time I was obsessing about an international conspiracy, and I wanted to see how real this was. So in my own code, because I was testing the voices in my head, I said, that there's a game playing, 10 billion for such and such. I don't remember what the 10 billion was about, but it was a billion for Beluga, who was off to China to help out with the corruption over there and to start a business. He was the head of Israeli intelligence. And 100 million for Sparrowhawk and me. And Sparrowhawk was Vladimir Putin, because I thought that he was part of this game that I was deluded into thinking that I had some sort of control or was privy to. So it can still manifest. I don't readily acknowledge paranoia. What takes place for me is I just slip into survival mode. And when my fear is threatened, when my safety is threatened, then I become paranoid. I don't realize that or I don't acknowledge that prior to that, being validated, that physical state of hypervigilance and deep insecurity. It's like I'm prepped for a bout of paranoia. But it's been that way my whole life. As a child, it was a game. If you could frighten someone, then you could laugh at them. And my father once called me, when I was paranoid, a silly bastard. So I equated that kind of fear and anxiety to that of being a silly bastard. And there wasn't too much prestige in being a silly bastard. You were a fool if you were termed that. And my pride and ego wouldn't allow me to, recognize the fact that I'd been, that I was paranoid. And another thing about it is the fear of abandonment. I once had a psychotic break as a 9 or 10-year-old child, where I chased my older brother around with a knife after he'd been harassing me. And, I didn't end up stabbing him or anything like that, but, I ended up kicking him in the testicles and he burst into tears and went upstairs and packed his bags and said he was running away from home. So I went from this intense rage, to intense fear, that a person I loved was going to leave home. I've been trying to process that yesterday. And, so, when I get paranoid, it can be about loss as well, and it's a cold, detached experience for me. And it's like, what do I do? I'm thinking about survival more so than acknowledging, what's going on in my physical being and acknowledging that, so, yeah, like I mentioned, paranoia, doesn't enter into my conscious reasoning thought process. Well, it's only really just starting to, so and the truth is I get paranoid all the time. I just don't want to acknowledge it. I don't acknowledge anxiety either, because of that. Anxious, vulnerable, survive, paranoid should come into it, but it doesn't. It's just fight or flight. And I guess that's where I've learned to suppress and mask, those kinds of feelings and sensations, due to the fear of being morally judged for it. So I think that's what's in question. And in my ideal self, none of those things exist either. And I have patronized that ideal for years. So yeah, it's all well and good. I wasn't going to speak for this long, but yeah, I think that's enough for this video. Please subscribe, say hello, leave a comment, things along those lines. I think I'll make another video this afternoon and try and up the ante a little bit. But I'm feeling pretty good within myself, which is good. And I think that's due to the fact that whilst I haven't and don't readily acknowledge paranoia, my sense of catastrophe or fatalism at having others, dislike me has gotten a lot better. I can understand the fact that, within all human beings, good and bad exist. And even in healthy relationships, you can intensely dislike an action or a behavior or an attitude of an intimate partner and still get over it. Whereas in my self-deluded world, none of those kinds of discrepancies manifest at all. It's pure, it's cleansed, and yeah, it's delusional. And once again, where I entertain, a lot of that kind of activity is in detached reverie, where I become self-fascinated, and it's all incorporeal in the sense, that I lose connection with my physical realm, and you know, once again enter into that solipsistic realm, where glory abounds. So good to be here. I'll leave it at that. Thanks. Bye.